Hey, how we doing out there, guys? So welcome back to another episode of the Bastion Black Performance Podcast. So I'm going to try to finish up my kind of little series here on my experiences in Fallujah. This one might be longer than the other ones. The other ones I tried to keep to an hour because that seems to be about my attention span, I think. And so like we said, it kind of reached the point where it was November 20th or 21st. I want to say it was the 20th, where we took a full day at the up at the train station. So we had been down, doing operations. So we lost a bunch of guys on the 19th, and then I believe it was the very next day. If not, it was one day removed. That we then came to the train station, stayed up there for a whole day, did the rest and refit, got a chance to call home for a couple minutes. Kind of reconstituted a little bit, as far as so by this point, my platoon, we were down. I don't know if we lost anybody else, from here to the end as far as permanent casualties, possibly, but I want to say we're basically down to where we ended up. And so this would have been, end of November, and my battalion did not leave. I think we got relieved on January the 26th. I don't know if that's the day that we flew out or that's the day we got relieved at the firm base, but January 26th is, for whatever reason, is a date that's kind of burned in my head on that. So at this point, my platoon, we're basically down to probably 16, 18 guys total from 43. So we got some augments from weapons platoon, because obviously, like I said before, weapons platoon in the kind of classic reinforced platoon role. Basically, each rifle company has 3 rifle platoons, and then each weapons platoon has 3 sections of machine guns, 3 sections of assault men, 3 sections of mortars, and typically you basically send a section of machine guns, section of the assault men, who are like the small rocket and the demo guys, to each platoon, and then the 60 millimeter mortar section typically stays with the company commander and the headquarters element, but. So we head back into the city. So again, to kind of rehash, so my battalion's responsibility was everything south of Fran, and Fran is Route Michigan when it's within the city here, and west of Route Henry. So we have 3 companies that are providing that. So India, Kilo, and Lima. So we head back into the city, and so now I'm going to try to more or less say things in chronological order as best that I can. But like I said, the only thing that I had to determine specific dates were the days that people got killed. So I don't know anything as far as specific dates anymore. But Fallujah kind of had some specific phases. So the initial, what I always call the squeegee cleaning phase, is kind of this first part before we go back up to the train station, and then we resume it when we come back in. So when we came back in, we basically resumed clearing stuff again. Now, we had been through our entire section of our AO. But so we basically did what we call re-clears or back clears, so that would be like, hey, you head back into an area that you've been in before and you clear buildings again, because it is impossible to clear every single room of every single house, every single outbuilding, every single fighting position, spider hole, culvert, sewer, whatever that you find, simultaneously or in a way that doesn't allow people to infiltrate back in through you. It's just completely impossible. So you're never going to get everybody doing that. So we head back down, in the southern part of the city, and I want to say the first day that we went back, we were kind of around the soccer field area, because I just remember there being kind of like a big open area down there. And so what we kind of shifted to at this point was we were still entering a lot of buildings, but we started kind of doing more of like a take over a building, set up Overwatch with machine guns and stuff, and then we were just wrecking a lot of stuff with bulldozers, because we'd taken so many casualties that were borderline combat ineffective. And we kept hearing rumors. I don't know if it's ever actually true. We kept hearing rumors that if your battalion gets below 50%, manpower or whatever it was, that you're labeled as combat ineffective and you have to be pulled back. So then kind of the running joke was like, hey, who wants to get wounded slightly so that we can get pulled back? I mean, at this point, basically everybody had been wounded at some point. I'm trying to think of. I think in my squad, Hoffman was the only person who did not get wounded at all. Every single other person in my squad definitely got wounded at least once. A few guys multiple times. I can't speak for the other squads specifically, but I want to say in the platoon as a whole, we only had a few guys who hadn't been wounded at all and evacuated for at least some amount of time. But so we had the bulldozers, and so we were also kind of, we were clearing stuff, and we were starting to do what you would call preparations for occupation and stuff like that. Because like I said, my company, we ended up occupying this building down here. So we called this the Raider Ranch. So we were in this building here and this building here, and then we basically had we eventually built a perimeter around that. We weren't in there yet, but so we kind of, at some point we started kind of clearing a lot of stuff to sort of push back. You'd think it was like a kill zone away from where we set up. But so now these operations are basically all the same as before. So still entering buildings. I would say honestly at this point we were a lot more cautious because we just had our numbers were way down, and so I was kind of going back and forth from I would be mounted if and when we were moving around, and then I would dismount a lot and go onto the roof of buildings and be around and stuff like that. So it's kind of doing a little bit of everything, which was common just because we had so few guys. And this is kind of where we kind of entered into a phase as well. I won't even call it CQB, because what we did was urban combat. It's kind of like some Eastern Front World War II kind of stuff. So it's we never really, for much of a period of time, were able to enter buildings in kind of a textbook manner, as far as because the manual says hey, never enter a building with fewer than 4 to 6 Marines, and you never enter a room with fewer than 2 Marines. And it's we just didn't, man, at this point 4 Marines was 25% of the entire platoon. So it's if you're going to have to send 4 guys into every building, the entire platoon could only go into into 4 buildings. Well, and that includes the corpsman, the platoon sergeant. Now, platoon sergeant went into a lot of buildings and shot a lot of people. The platoon commander, who really didn't do anything, so that was kind of comical. So we did a lot of stuff where just be 2 of us would go into a building and we do kind of what you call a deliberate clear. So kind of slowly, clear it. And a couple of things that I learned in this, which is good experience, is that urban combat is as confusing for the enemy as it is for you. So if you keep your mouth shut and you don't make a lot of noise as far as your equipment and you're yelling and you're running and stuff like that, the chances that you can actually get into buildings and them not be aware of you being there is actually rather high. And this was something my platoon sergeant did a lot. I kind of think it was by accident, but I think it worked out. He went into a fair amount of buildings kind of by himself or with one other guy and shot a lot of dudes, who were textbook, wearing chest rigs, had rifles, but they had the rifles sitting on the ground, leaning against the wall, and they were kind of standing next to him, whatever kind of stuff. And I think it's just because people never knew he was there, because, the flip side of doing the big preparatory work before entering is that now you're letting anyone know. Now you might kill them or wound them or incapacitate them, but you're also letting them know that you're there. And so that was something to kind of keep in mind, which is hey, if you just kind of shut your mouth, observe the windows and stuff like that, see if you can make sure nobody's in the rooms that immediately can observe the doors you go in it. You can probably make it in there a fair amount of times without anyone knowing. And then you have a real good chance of kind of being the one to initiate the action. So that was kind of something to take in with that. So we did a lot of clearing during this time, and I have no idea where we went on what day. We were all over the place within our AO. We were primarily south because, like I said, where we ended up setting up the company firm base was down here. So my company, was primarily, kind of way down in this south area. And I don't remember, we sectioned off from Kilo Company and Lima Company at some point. Lima Company is based up in that flour factory, which is up here somewhere, I think, or maybe it might be this building over here. So they were kind of more up in this area. Kilo Company was more in this central kind of section, and we were in the southern section down there. So we did a lot of re-clearing, wrecked a lot of buildings and stuff like that. We were still getting into engagements and things. It was a lot more of just single individuals and stuff, and I don't really remember any other engagements that we got into where there was a team or a squad, number of guys, because obviously we'd whittle them down. It's just at some point for them, it's you can't move around in groups of 10 without being spotted by, somebody at some point. So other things that we started, kind of doing, we're kind of going a little bit harder on, we had to start marking buildings as far as what they had inside for enemy KIA and weapons and stuff like that. So you'll kind of see, I should have pulled up a picture, but I forgot to, but so you'll see occasionally where and we also had to start going and marking buildings that we had cleared just so that we could, because we were trying to do the really now formal, hit every building, in succession kind of clear. So you'll see where we have a circle with an X through it, and then you'll see numbers written in each of the little, kind of pizza slices that X makes. And it indicates things like, if they're wounded inside, is there KIA inside? Or enemy KA, friendly KA, things like that. And it's for like mortuary affairs and stuff when they come later. So we kind of had to start doing stuff like that. We also were kind of consolidating weapons and stuff like that more that we'd found and blowing some of that stuff up. So we did that phase for a while where we did like the really formal re-clearing. And then we kind of started to get into less formal re-clearing. And so I think when we kind of started the less formal re-clearing was when we finally sort of set up in my company's firm base. So we would go out into a specific section as like, as the patrolling squads, and we would clear all of those buildings, but we didn't have the tanks with us anymore. We didn't have the bulldozers with us anymore. So we just had the organic weapons that we could carry with us. And so we would go out and do that. The other thing we started doing during that time, I kind of mentioned this previously, is that because infiltrators and like single and very small numbers of enemy were still around, when we go into houses that we'd clear, we would take the stuff in there, pile it all in the middle of the house, and then set it on fire to deny it to the enemy. So we started. So it was like it became SOP that you had to carry. Every squad had to have a bottle of like JP8 or diesel fuel or something with you to assist with that. So we started doing a lot of that. And at some point in this, again, I don't remember chronologically. So, like I said, Henry was our north-south running boundary that cut us off, east to west. And on this side of it, initially it was 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. At some point, they got relieved in place by 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, so Hawaii Marines, and 1-3 had to immediately start like formal clearing operations again. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to like talk shit on 1-8 because I don't know what their circumstances were, but I know it's like we got contacted by 1-3 that basically like, hey, there were sections of their AO that they needed to do a very formal, complete re-clear. So myself and a few other guys went out. I remember my platoon sergeant was one of them, and because we had the vehicle that I was with. And so we were parked somewhere on our side of the road looking across. And I remember specifically because we were basically there to keep anyone that they drove out of the buildings from running across into our section. So we were basically guarding the road just to keep them from coming over into our area. But we were not supposed to be firing into their side of Henry, for obvious safety reasons. I remember wherever we like stopped to park, I want to say it might even have been like this building right here because we were kind of parked on like a little dirt sort of area, looking straight across, and there was kind of a sort of a bigger house that's kind of standalone. It was like the first house of the day. They went to enter it and immediately took a KIA like right away because it was full of dudes. And I remember I could see like their guys running outside the building trying to do stuff and things like that. And it's probably only 100 yards away, so it's like right in front of us. And I remember I was not pleading, but I was one step down from pleading. I was like, I kept saying, I was like, hey, if you get them pulled back from that building, I'll freaking wreck it with the Mark 19. Because the way I was sitting, I had a completely unobstructed view of the longest side of it. And I was like, you give me 5 minutes to work that thing over and you'll never recognize it again. And I kept saying that, but they wouldn't give me approval because obviously they would have had to radio 1-3 and it probably would have been a big, dick smashing contest kind of thing as well. But so that whole day, I don't really remember us doing anything that day, but I remember that specific incident because that like started off the day. But so we kind of just basically moved with them as they cleared stuff to keep people from running across Henry into our zones. Remember that being one specific thing that happened. There was another time where we had to go out as a patrol, and this I think was quite a ways after the fact. So we had to go back into this section here. So remember, this was the soccer field, and I said over here is where we had, Perez and Berger and all those guys get shot. And I had said that the enemy had managed to actually get their hands on Perez's body and take some of his stuff. Then the next day we ended up running that building over and killing the remaining guys inside with bulldozer, combination of bulldozer and small arms and stuff like that. Well, we were still missing some of Perez's things. So patrol that I was on, we had to go out there and actually sift through the rubble and look for his stuff. And we ended up finding it. If I remember right, it was his compass and possibly his night vision goggles. Maybe something else was in the rubble. And where it was in the rubble, and the reason it kind of like, it was sort of spooky was because like where it was in the rubble was nowhere near where he was when he got killed. So it means that they definitely got a hold of him, definitely got his stuff and took it. So that was kind of a little spooky. And so I remember that happening. Now, also at this time, by the time we kind of set up and we're doing our less formal clears, I was kind of going back and forth between carrying a 240 when we were going out or just carrying an M16. And so, and for me, it was completely selfish. The reason I was, because I was technically a part of the machine gun section, during most of the clearing stuff, even though I was still working with my squad or whatever else. And then when we started going out on patrol, so instead of having like our 3 squads of 13 like we should have, we basically just had like 2 8-man like sections that we could take out on patrols. And so I kept carrying the 241s. I hated, I was worried they would try to give me my saw back. They never did, which is good. So I didn't want to go back to carrying my saw because I kind of talked about that in other videos. My saw was held together by zip ties, never worked right. I didn't like it at all. But it also gave me like sort of some plausible deniability to stay and kind of do my own thing. And I'm kind of very much want to be on my own program kind of person. And like I said, I had some issues with my fire team leader, and I just didn't really want to be under his particular supervision again, or at least specifically on patrol anymore. So I would kind of waffle back and forth between carrying the 240 or the rifle. When I finally stopped carrying the 240 because I kind of got yelled at. So this is great Marine Corps-ism. So we always have the term serialized gear in the Marine Corps. So serialized gear is anything that you get from the armory, and obviously so it has a serial number. So it has a specific number for that thing. It's assigned to your name. When you sign it out, like when you're in the States, you actually have to have cards. So every single thing you get from the armory, you have a card, like a laminated card that lists that thing, your name, and a serial number to be able to check it out. And so somehow I had gotten to where when we were getting set up to go in Fallujah, and I got put over to machine gun section, I ended up having to go check out both the 240s attached to my platoon, the PAS 13 thermal optic for both of those. I still had the 17 Bravo for my saw. I had an M16 assigned to me. I had a shotgun assigned to me. I had my 7 Bravo NVGs. I had my A-bag. I had my bayonet. There's probably other stuff that I don't remember, but I think I had an M9. I don't remember. I don't think the M9 ever got assigned to me. I think I just basically acquired that. But I had all those things assigned to me, and obviously I had no idea where most of the stuff for the 240 was, because one of them, I never touched a 240 until this particular phase of Fallujah. I was on Mark 19, or I had a rifle most of the time. Well, then they came down with some sort of genius Marine Corps ruling within the company that said, hey, when you go out on patrol, you have to take all of your serialized gear with you on patrol. You can't leave any of it in the company firm base. And 37-year-old me, I would just tell somebody to fuck off to their face, because it's completely asinine, makes no sense. But 19-year-old me, it's like as a Lance Corporal, you don't have anyone to bitch to, which is, it's like, people in the military, like, you get a bad reputation, and some of it's really well deserved, don't get me wrong, for bitching and moaning all the time, but like, because the problem is that there's no person that you can complain to that can have any effect if they don't want it to have any effect, right? It's not like a free market system where I could, take my car in for an oil change and like, hey, you guys scratched the paint on this, whatever. Like, no, we didn't, or whatever. It's like, okay, one, I could choose to not go back there and give them any business. I could dispute the charges with, the credit card company. I could take the small claims court if it's that big of a deal or whatever. But in the military, there's none of that. They could be like, hey, do this incredibly stupid thing. You can be like, no. And they go, yes, do it. You have to go, okay. Or you have to get NJP'd or court-martialed. So at this time, I would take the 240 out on patrol. And I did this a few times, and I stopped doing it. So literally, like, and I'm not trying to exaggerate to make myself seem like I'm super cool or anything like that. But at this time, I would take the 240 out. So I'd have the 240. I'd have a backpack with 500 rounds of ammo, and then we always call it like a contact belt, because the 240 doesn't have anything attached to it so that you can like have ammo like slung underneath to shoot it, because the 240 is a true medium machine gun. You don't use that thing on your feet other than just a contact belt would basically be like, oh, hey, I came around the corner and there was a dude right there. I needed to just spray something from the hip to get rid of that while I then drop down prone or whatever to get into action. And so I got, 240 with a contact belt, 500 rounds in the backpack, the PAS 13 thermal back there, and then an extra battery for the PAS 13, which is a very big battery. Then no shit, I had to have my M16 and my shotgun strapped to that backpack, my M9. Then I had, I had shotgun shells, various mags for the M16, multiple grenades, water bottles, all that stuff. And I weighed it out once, like when I did the calculations, it was like 132 pounds. All my armor and everything that I went on patrol with like a few times was like that. And I was like, dude, this sucks. So then after that, I would just take just my M16 and the shotgun. I ended up giving the 9mm back, or it got taken away from me, something like that. So then I would just go out with just my M16 and the shotgun. And obviously, and that point was probably the happiest that I'd been during that deployment, like weapons-wise, because I spent that entire deployment carrying either a saw or a 240 plus multiple other weapons, and then to basically be down to like just having to carry a rifle, I was like, dude, this is, like, I'm so free to move around right now. But so we're doing all these re-clears and kind of doing operations and stuff. And at some point we settled into like kind of more or less like normal patrols, but we're still highly encouraged to go into buildings all the time and search around, because we'd also find things like this was. So I mentioned that story last time where we blew up that building that hurt Gooch, and one part of that story that I just hadn't occurred to me to tell at that time was that across the street from that, and so like I said before, is that buildings tended to have kind of like a theme, but they're also and it makes sense, like they're very neighborhood focused. And you think about like America, it'd be the same way, right? Like you have a neighborhood that's very like it might be like around like ethnically kind of focused, or it might be like, hey, this area is a bunch of like Hawkeye fans, this area is a bunch of like Tampa Bay fans, like these guys are all they like all these kids go to this school and they're all a member of such and such elite volleyball team, whatever. So similar kind of thing as far as like military, quote, like what we would call basically militia types of things, is they'd be very geographically kind of centered. So this building across the street from that building that we blew up, inside of there they found a laptop with all sorts of videos from Ansar al-Sunna, which was a major insurgent group at the time. And so they had a video in there of a vehicle-borne IED attack that they did against my company when we were at the Ding. So if you guys remember back from like my first video or two, we talked about being at the Delta ING compound, the Ding. So they hit us with 2 car bombs one day, and they only managed to like minorly wound 2 guys. But there was actually a video of that attack that Ansar al-Sunna had taken on this laptop in this building that we went into. So that was kind of like cool, but also like sort of creepy, because it means that like there were people that were watching with a video camera out there that nobody like knew about, because this is kind of still like the early days of that stuff. So that was kind of interesting. Couple of other like sort of funny stories, and I'll get to like a couple actual like combat stories. So there was so we had these engineers attached to us. We kind of used them as augments to sort of bump up our total numbers. Obviously just because we're super like short on numbers. So we had this one. I won't say him by name because this is going to be super disparaging, but anyone in my platoon for certain knows exactly who this guy was. But anyways, they're out on patrol one day, and they kind of it wasn't in my squad; it was in the other squads. We only were running 2 squads at this time, and so at some point one of the NCOs goes, "Hey, is there anyone here who hasn't thrown a grenade that wants to throw a grenade?" Because there were basically 3 doors into this building, so this engineer guy kind of like, "Yes, sir," like raises his hand, like, "All right, cool, you can throw it at that middle door." And so, basically 3 guys up there, and they're like, hey, all right, pull your pins, 1, 2, 3, everyone throw. So they're only like 10 feet away from this door. So instead of doing what any other rational human being would do, which would be to pull the pin and then just, overhand, kind of like a baseball, just chuck it in there. It's only 10 feet away. For some reason, he decides to underhand it, and he throws it right off the top of like the door jamb, or above the door jambs, right above the door. So it hits, bounces back, and then one of my real good friends, Thompson, not Big Thompson, not my fire team leader, different Thompson, is standing right there. And so as it hits, like, he tries to run away, boom, blows up, hits him with a chunk in the calf. Now he's like fine. It's not like a really serious wound, but it was like a piece of frag, like right in the middle of the calf. And he's funny because he's one of those guys, like when he gets excited, well, not so much now, but when he was younger, like he would talk like crazy fast, and only like a few people could understand him at first. He'd be like, "Oh, the engineer fragged me." We're like, "What?" Like, and then we got one of our friends to translate it. It was like, "Oh, the engineer fragged him." Got you. But yeah, so that particular engineer did not have a good reputation in my platoon whatsoever. And it's funny, but it's also like that's the kind of dumb stuff that gets people hurt for no good combat reason whatsoever. It's just like, hey, and there's they're basically throwing grenades because, one, we got to a phase where like we kind of had to get rid of stuff because we had so many things like still sitting around. We didn't have a place for it, like munitions wise, but also kind of reached a point where like all the actual grunts in my platoon had now like shot most of the things, thrown grenades, done most of the stuff, and then we had some like attachments to us who were basically, kind of helping us out because they're so low on numbers. So this was kind of us doing a solid to them because it's like, hey, where else are you going to get to throw live grenades? Hey, where else are you going to get to shoot a rocket? Like whatever it is. And so then to actually wound one of our guys. So that guy is, so while we augment with this dude, he wounds one of our guys. So he's technically a net negative. So that was kind of a funny one. There's another funny one that involved myself. And so we went out one night and on a night patrol, and we were out in the boonies, and we were either like up in like this section up here, or we were over in like this section here, because we'd kind of gone through the reeds and out and about and stuff like that. And so I was carrying spare ammo for the machine gun at this time, because we had one of the machine gun, a couple of machine gun section guys were carrying a 240 with us, and so we're walking at night down this little dirt road, and my buddy Hoffman is the one right in front of me. And so Hoffman's walking, and all of a sudden he just stops frozen, like he saw a freaking ghost or whatever. And so like when you see that, everyone like, okay, when he freezes, when the guy in front freezes, you freaking freeze. And then it's like, okay, once you've frozen for a few seconds, then you try to melt into the ground, or you melt into the wall or something for, cover concealment or whatever. And this is the middle of the night, so I don't know, it's probably like 1 in, something like that. So I kind of see Hoffman, and I was kind of looking at him, and he didn't make any more movements, and he didn't like raise his weapon up like he was going to get like, immediate like contact. So I kind of like jogged up to him, and I was like, Hoffman, I was like, what's up, dude? And he goes, that building right there, 2 o'clock, guy on the roof. And I was like, what? He's like, there's a guy just popped up, took a turkey peek at me. I'm waiting for him to come back up. And I was like, oh shit. Okay, so basically, kind of like real quick, and I don't mean assemble the troops like I'm in charge here or whatever. Like I kind of relay the word. And we had a couple of NCOs out with us or whatever. So we basically come up with like, hey, we're going to come over to this building and we're going to clear it. And only one of us, and again, the early days of the GWAT and, like equipment availability, only one of us in that entire squad had a weapon-mounted light. And that was my friend Leatherwood, who I mentioned in other stories. He got shot in the finger and stuff like that. So what we were going to do is, like, him and I were going to throw grenades in the windows, and then we were going to go inside. I think there was one other person that was going in with us, and then Leatherwood was going to go in first because he had the light, and I was going to come in behind him, because I had my NVGs, and, be able to give him backup on that. So we run up to the side of this house, and like all Iraqi houses, there's bars on the windows. So, I kind of did this a little bit, like almost too textbook. But so, so the textbook way to throw the grenade like through the window is you duck under the window. Like you never want to be standing in front of the window, right? So I duck under the window, and then you always reach back to clear to make sure that there's actually like a hole, like an opening to put the grenade in. Because it's freaking dark out, I can't see anything. So I sort of duck below the window. I reach my right arm back, and as soon as I put my arm through the bars, it goes straight through a hole, like, in the window. I'm like, okay, I'm good to go. So I look across at Leatherwood, and 2 windows aren't very far apart, and so both pull the pins. And I was really big on milking grenades. And milking grenade is when you pull the pin, you let the spoon go. So you let the spoon go and you cook it off for a couple seconds. Now, the reason that you do that is, because the fuse is, 3 to 5 seconds. 3 seconds is not very much time, but 5 seconds is an eternity. So when you're thrown into buildings, like you don't want them to get thrown back, which is, way more common than you think that it is for people to throw stuff back. So kind of the 2 methods that you get around that is you either milk it, or if you're throwing it into a room in particular, you try to throw it really hard so that when it hits the walls, it bounces around a bunch and it's hard for a guy to catch. The other reason that you milk it and stuff like that is like, the obvious thing to do if a grenade lands next to you is just to run away from it. And like in 5 seconds, you could run 20 yards away, so it's like, you don't want the guy to like get away from the grenade. So anyways, looking at Leatherwood, we kind of give each other the hey, what's up, man, nod. Okay, pull the pin, let the spoon go. And as I go to put it in the window, I hit solid glass with my arm. And I was like, what the shit? So I was like, trying to go through there, nothing. I get up and I look. And obviously I'm processing this very quickly. So that entire window was still solid glass, but there was like a softball size hole in the window. And it had just so happened that when I put my arm up there blindly, I put my hand straight in that and never felt glass at all. So I thought I was good to go. So, I mean, the span of this, what's this take, like 2 seconds, 3 seconds? So I'm basically getting down to the end of the grenade's lifespan here. But Leatherwood's also throwing a grenade in there, which means his is going to go off inside while I'm standing up in front of this window. So I see this, put my arm in, drop the grenade. As soon as it gets below the windowsill, boom, blows up right in my face. And I was like, whoa! Okay, I didn't get like shrapnel or anything. It's obviously just an explosion right in front of my face. So like, okay. So then we get ready to go over to like kick the door in, and then someone's like, hey, I'm going to throw one up on the roof. Like, okay, cool. And, because the guy was up on the roof. So whoever it was, it might have been Leatherwood again, I don't remember, but whoever it was goes to throw a grenade up on the roof. And I remember I was still sitting by the window, and now I had already been up in front of the window, so I just stayed up in front of the window. They're like, hey, I'm already here. I'm just going to try to command this space. So I remember whoever throws the grenade, so I hear them, because you yell frag out when you throw a grenade, so you know a grenade's going out. So I hear frag out, and then I hear dink, 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 like in front of me. And I was like, what? Boom! Grenade blows up like right in front of us inside of this like little building. And it's like a 1-story single room, like little shack kind of thing. And I was like, what the fuck was that? So we kick the door in. I go in behind Leatherwood, start looking at stuff with lights. As soon as we get in there, it's immediately clear what this place is. It's literally a 1-story, 1-room shack filled from like floor to ceiling with school desks. There is no roof on it whatsoever. What it was there was a plastic bag that had that was like in the mortar, on the roof for some reason. And what had happened was the breeze came along and it popped up just a little bit. As you think about it at night, you got like kind of a whitish plastic bag, and like dudes over there wear dishdashas and kind of white man dresses and stuff, and it pops up at night. So Hoffman had he'd just seen this thing kind of get floated up in front of him and thought that it was a dude. Can't really blame him. I would have thought the same thing probably. So we wasted a solid like 10 or 15 minutes and almost, blew each other up with grenades multiple times to assault a plastic bag on the top of a roof. So that was that was kind of funny. Again, kind of working back now. So now we'll get into like some actual like kind of combat operations. I've told this particular story in one of my other videos, but I'll regale it again here. So we go out one day to do some re-clear stuff, and I'm out, dismounted. I might have been carrying ammo for machine gun section at the time. I want to say that I was. Yeah, I was definitely carrying ammo for machine gun at that time as well. But so we get to this section, and I could probably almost find where we were actually, because of the nature of the buildings here. So there was kind of like a little open field next to us, and we got down to like a big, sort of open area. So we might have been in like this section here, and it might have been like this house over here, because this is route, I believe this is Jenna, we called this. Let me look again. So I'm pretty sure this is route Jenna, and we were like north of Jenna, and then we ended up here. It's also possible it's like this building. But anyway, so we're kind of in this section again of the area, and let me kind of look. I almost wonder, might be like this right here, this kind of area. Regardless, that's not the important thing. For ease of example's sake, we'll say that this was the section we were in, because I think that it might be. But anyways, so as we're moving up, my again, so I was out like, we were kind of like augmented. So we had tanks with us. So this might have happened like earlier than my last story. It probably definitely did, but that doesn't really matter. So we had tanks that were with us, or they were at least around, and a bulldozer that was around as well. And then we had some weapons platoon augments, who were carrying the SMAW and stuff like that. But so as we're running up here, I don't remember who I was with. It was like me and one other guy. So again, we'll say that this was the building right here. So the building right in front of me, the front door like slammed shut when we were kind of coming up on it. And I remember I called out to Sergeant Garcia, who was leading my little squad at the time. I said, Sergeant Garcia, this door right here just slammed shut. We're going to go in there and clear it. He goes, okay. So I run in there with whoever was with me. I don't remember specifically. And we go in there and clear it, and it's nothing. So it's probably just the wind. And then so Sergeant Garcia and them, so again, we'll assume it's this area, they go into the building that's next door to it. And so him and these other two guys like cleared it, allegedly. And they're like, hey, that's clear. They're like, all right, go put the machine gun up on the roof. So we run up on the roof, put the machine gun up there. I think it was a guy by the name of Barless who was carrying the machine gun, and I had the ammo for it. So we get up on the roof, and there was quite a few of us up on the roof. I don't know what there was, like 8 of us maybe. But so we had him up there. We had another guy carrying a small from Weapons Platoon up there. And so we're up on the roof, and all of a sudden, like beneath our feet, we hear bap, bap, boom, boom. And we're like, hey, what's going on? And like, hey, does anyone up here have comms? Because I didn't have a radio. Like, at this time, radios weren't super prevalent, like within the squads. Like, usually, maybe the fire team leader would have like a PRR, like a little personal roll radio, and then like the squad as a whole would have like one like 119 Alpha or Foxtrot. So we're like, hey, who's got comms? Who's got comms? And so whoever's up there, I want to say maybe Staff Sergeant Voss was up there with us. Sergeant Navarro. Doesn't matter. I'm just in my head. It's kind of popping up, and we're like, we're kind of waiting, getting the feedback. He goes, hey, there's a guy in the building directly attached behind us. He just shot Lind. We need to jump across and get this guy out of there. So if we can kind of, again, so we're going to use this and say this is where it was. I can't verify that for sure. We're going to say, so it's like, this house that we're on, this house is next door to, or sorry, this house that we were on, and it was like the house that was behind it that they're like, hey, that's the one we got to go clear. So they're like, hey, we need a couple guys to jump across. And I was like, okay, I'll go across. And they're like, hey, who else? And so then it was like, it ended up being my fire team leader, Big Thompson, and then this other guy from machine gun section named Irvin, who said that they'd come across with me. So our first task is that we're on top of, it's more than like a second story. Like, this is a very big house. It wasn't like a 3-story house, but it was more than just like the second story. Like, we are way up in the air, but there's also like a 3 or 4 foot tall wall around the roof, which is very common over there. So we're, I don't know what that is, 30 feet, like 20, 30 feet up in the air. So we have to get up on this wall, and the wall was only like one brick wide. Like, it was not like a big wall at all. And then it was like a 3 foot, or 4 foot jump onto the building that was next to it. And so obviously that was like down a little bit. It wasn't like it was a whole story like shorter, but it's at least that 3 or 4 foot from the wall, the top of the wall. So I had my weapon. So I had the M16, I had a shotgun. So I kept the shotgun slung, and then I jumped across first. And it was like, I'm like, dude, if you fall, like, you're gonna break. I was like super nervous to jump across that. So I jump, kind of stumble a little bit, keep my feet, stay up there. Someone throws me my rifle across there. So I sling my rifle, take my shotgun out. The other 2 guys jump across. And so I was on the roof. And so I kind of had to go around the roof, because where I jumped across, I was kind of like on top of like, the carport kind of area. So I had to like take a right and then a right to get to the little like enclosed housing of the stairs that go down there. So I'm kind of leading, going down there, and I'm the first one to the door. And when I get to the door and I look in, it was like, man, like all my piss and vinegar just kind of got sapped, because it was one of those buildings. So that it was a dirt floor inside. We had knocked the power out in Fallujah before we started all this stuff, and it was getting to be kind of like late afternoon, so everything's kind of hazy, So there's no lights on inside, dirt floor. So it just had that kind of like low hanging like dust, that kind of just like sort of permeated. And then, kind of the orange sun rays were kind of coming in from the back windows, the windows on the other side of the house. And when I looked down there, I was just like fucking terrified. I was like, man, this just looks like a nightmare. And it's like, it just, the way that it looked was super like dingy, which is, obviously it's definitely not the first house that I, entered into in Fallujah or anything, but it's like, sometimes if it's like really bright or like a really well lit house, you could see everything really well. But when you get to the ones that are really dingy, because like, you don't fear the thing that you can see and fight. It's like why people are afraid of the dark, right? It's like, if you're sitting in the middle of, a football field in the middle of the day, you wouldn't be scared of anything. But you sit out there at night when you can't see anything, you start hearing weird bugs and animal sounds, like people get scared. It's kind of the same thing, So it's like I look down there, I can't see very well, but looking down the stairs, there's at least 2 doors on the left, possibly 3, I can't remember. There's a door directly in front of the stairs. Then coming down the stairs, if you look to your 1 o'clock, there is like a door and a very short, like, it's probably not even a hallway, but there's basically a door and an entry into the kitchen. Then as you look sort of to the 3 o'clock from the stairs, there's another door to a room there. And then as you basically get to like your 5 o'clock from the stairs, you could go under the stairs for like storage, which is very common, in all of their houses there. And then there's another door that goes out the back over there. So there's 3 of us, So I'm looking down and I'm seeing, 3 times as many doors as people. And I was like, whoa, okay, hold on a second. And so Thompson's like, he's like, go, go, go. What's up? What's up? What's up? And I was like, I don't think we should rush down there. And especially because they told us that, like, hey, there's a dude in one of these rooms. We don't know which one he's in, So, and by now, if there's a dude in there, he definitely heard us jump across onto the roof, like coming down. So, like, we do not have the element of surprise. So I'm like, hey, let's throw some grenades down there first, and then run down there. And he's like, well, I don't have any grenades. You got any grenades? And I was like, dude, I got like 15 grenades, which is true. I always took the bandolier pouches that saw drums come in. I'd keep 1 or 2 of those. I put multiple grenades in there, and then I had like an actual saw pouch like on my vest, and I kept a bunch of grenades in there and in my pockets and stuff because I like to throw grenades. They were really cool, and I was 19 years old and I like to throw grenades. So I give him a grenade, I give Irvin a grenade, I keep one, and we basically each pick a door. So it's like, hey, I was going to take the closest door, one of them was going to take the door next to it, one of them was going to take the door in front. So we kind of do the like, hey, everyone pulls the pin, and 1, 2, 3, everyone throw them down there. And mine definitely hit the doorway and bounced out and was sitting right in front of the door and didn't go in. And so we had enough time, so Thompson kind of gives me the thumbs up, Irvin kind of like gives me the nod, he's like, yours go in, and I was like, not sure. But in my head I was like, no, it did not go in. I had the easiest throw and I missed. Boom! All the grenades go off at the same time. I go charging down the stairs. Hadn't occurred to me in my brain that you throw a grenade into a house with a dirt floor, or you throw 3 grenades into a house with a dirt floor, and you can't see, like, if you thought it was bad before, now it's really bad. So I was like, oh, crap. So, but now we're committed. So I go running down the stairs, and I peel off going to the first room. I can't see a thing. Like, it's just dust everywhere. And so basically the only thing I could do was, so I had a shotgun in front of me, and I was kind of just holding it kind of in the chicken wing, so kind of just tucked against my side. And I kind of was basically, I just sort of walked it out in front of me until I got to the corners, and then I was kind of poking it around. So I was like, hey, if I run into somebody or somebody like grabs this or moves it or whatever, I have the safety out, I'll just start blasting, and and if that doesn't work, I'll start swinging it and see if I can't switch to my rifle or whatever. So I kind of go around just poking everything, whatever. Don't see anything, it starts to clear a little, can't see anything. I run out and I was like, hey, that's clear. And they're like, hey, mine's clear. And like, okay. Then the door that was to the 3 o'clock of the stairs as you go down kind of like goes bap, like, hits shut. And I kind of just look at Thompson, and I kind of, with my left hand, I kind of just, like point to it. So bang, 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 bang. He starts shooting through that door. He runs over, kicks it open, goes, like, runs in. I go in behind him, cleared out, nothing. Must have just been the wind. Nothing out of the ordinary there. But their doors were always like that, like the steel doors. I mean, relatively thin steel doors, but also their door frames, they'd have that steel kind of inlay on them. So when it would hit, it would be really loud. So it was a little bit unsettling, because it was like, you just get this bang, like when it hit. And so as we go to come out of this room, I sort of look out of the corner of my eye towards like this little hallway, the little doorway that goes into the kitchen. And I see this flash of movement, like moving quickly. And I was like, shit, there he goes. So I pull the shotgun up, I am safety off, and I am in the process of breaking a shot when, like, the guy clears the corner a little bit more, and it was our third guy, Irvin. He had basically gone off by himself without telling us he was going in there. And so it turned out that the one door that was, like, right in front of the stairs, as it went through, it connected to the kitchen on the other side. So he went through that door into the kitchen and then back out the kitchen towards myself. And I was like, dude, you got to tell us if you're going to run off like that. Because I was trying to shoot you, but the gun just hadn't gone off yet. So we clear this whole thing, nobody in there. And we're like, what the hell? So then so Thompson, like, kind of gets on his PRR. And so we kind of step out, and now we're kind of like yelling with the guys that are up on the roof to the house that we just jumped across from. And they're like, hey, you guys, hey, we're going to come down to you. We need to come back around the other side of the street. And we're like, what? They're like, hey, we're coming to you. So all the guys on the roof start jumping across the roof, coming down the house that we were in. So again, I'm going to use this as an example. I don't know that it actually was one of these buildings right here. It's possible. But anyways, so as we jump down, then we basically all run back around, and then we end up back in like this building here on the roof. And so they pull up. So then they basically hit that house with like 2 small rounds, like rocket rounds. They hit it with 2 main gun rounds from a tank, pull the tank off. They try to run it over with the bulldozer, but the house was kind of angled up a little bit, like where the yard was. And then once there was like a little bit of rubble, the bulldozer couldn't make it up over like that steep of an angle. So then he backs off. There was a hole looking into like the rooms. So I'm up there. I start blasting my rifle into this back corner. My fire team leader, so Thompson, starts trying to shoot 203 rounds in there. But there was like a couple little pieces of rebar hanging down from where the bulldozer had been. And like I said, I can't prove it, but there's something that's magnetic about 40 millimeter grenades and like little pieces of metal, because you shouldn't be able to hit a piece of 1/2 inch rebar, from 50 yards away, trying to put it into this room. But he hit it more than he didn't hit it. And then my buddy Hoffman's up there with us, and he goes through a couple saw drums, blasting into this, into this house. And then they're like, hey, ceasefire, teams make an entry. So then one of the teams, one of the other like groups that was with us, they basically run up there. And it's kind of a cool little scene because there's like all this rubble in the yard. And so one of my buddies runs up there, Corporal Flaherty, and so they kind of, run up. One of the guys like, kind of stops, like chucks the grenade, and then as it goes off, they kind of all go charging up the rubble. It's kind of cool, look like something out of like a war movie. And they get up in the building, and we're kind of all like, so now we're kind of waiting to see like what kind of shit they get into. So they go running up the rubble, get in there, and all you hear is, bap. And I was like, okay. And they come out, he's like, hey, got him. And we're like, dude, what? So what it turns out had happened was the people who had entered the house and had said that it was cleared had not actually cleared it very well at all. And so what had happened was the engineer from the previous story about throwing a grenade and hurting my friend Thompson had gone into one of the rooms because he wanted to look out of the window out the back. He had his rifle slung over his back, and as he goes through this bedroom, he runs across this pile of blankets in the back room. Runs across a pile of blankets. As he steps on the pile of blankets, the blankets go, ugh! And so instead of using his rifle that's on his back and dealing with this, he runs out. And so one of my friends and his like team are like out front. He runs out and he's like, there's a dude. And they're like, what? He's like, there's a dude in the house. He's in that room. So for this house, if you were coming in from like the front door and you looked in, the stairs went from your left and they went up and away to the left and kind of then wound around. Is how they went to the upstairs and then to the roof. And in front of you, there was like a door right by the bottom of the stairs, a door to the right of that, possibly one other door. I can't remember if there was 3 there or not. And there was a door that would have been kind of at your like 1 or 2 o'clock that went to the kitchen. So he's like, hey, middle door. So one of my friends, and his team, like, so they basically go up. So if a guy told you there was one guy in a room in this middle door, which is basically kind of right in line with the front door, you would run around to the left so you don't get in front of that, right? Well, so that's what they do. So they come in, they kind of wind around to the left. So they're basically between the stairs and the door that's on the left. They cross the threshold, the opening of the door on the left, because that's cleared, allegedly, to go enter into the middle door. Well, as they cross the threshold of the door that's in the middle, guy who's in the left room just leans an RPK out, bap, 1 round, shoots one of the machine gun section guys in the trap. Now, luckily, it was just a flesh wound. It hit only muscle tissue, so it ended up being fine. He had to get evacuated and stuff like that. But then, so apparently what had happened was that guy only got 1 round off. We didn't know that until later, when they found his weapon later. He had some sort of malfunction. So he gets 1 round off. So then the couple other dudes basically grab this guy and like drag him into the kitchen real quick. And so one of my friends starts putting a couple shotgun rounds towards that room and takes out a grenade, chucks a grenade in there. Guy picks up the grenade, chucks it back, boom. He's like, what the hell? Then the guy throws his own grenade in there, boom. Luckily doesn't wound anyone with that. So that was like the bap bap and the boom boom that we heard from the roof. So then eventually, like, my friend tries to blow the locks off of the kitchen and get him out of there. And he kind of has like a funny interaction where like he blows all the latches off the door, but he can't get the door to go off. Well, and then like, kind of in his excitement, he'd forgotten to just like turn the handle or move the actual like the normal like latch on it or whatever. So they run out, come back around, and that was when they told us, hey, there's a guy up there. And so it's one of those where like communication matters. I mean, obviously, particularly in like violent encounters, because like, hey, I mean, one, this engineer should have just done his job and should just shot the guy in there. But he didn't. So then when he went out, he communicated very poorly, got somebody wounded because of it, could have potentially got more people hurt because of it. Then when these guys relayed it to whoever, like then relayed it on the radio to us on the roof, they had relayed that the guy was in the house that was out the back, because those 2 buildings were only 3 or 4 feet apart. And so one, we wasted all this time, but it's like, we could have potentially gotten people hurt, and now we were really spreading our assets out into multiple buildings while we had wounded and stuff like that. So communication freaking matters, man. So thus ended that particular day's, clearing. And luckily, like the worst thing we had to show for it was a guy took a round in the trap and he ended up being fine. So that was okay. I'm trying to think of, if there's any other like really like relevant stories in there. There's not really. There's a couple other kind of like happenings. So at some point we had someone in the battalion got bit by a stray dog and had to go get treated for rabies. So we had a period, I don't know if it was a day, maybe it was like 3 days or whatever, where we were given like complete authorization to shoot any dogs that we saw. There were dogs everywhere in Fallujah at this point because there's just dead bodies laying all over the ground in all these houses because the mortuary affair guys, who come and pick up the bodies, I don't know, I assume they started somewhere and they're working their way south. They hadn't gotten down to us yet. So we had like a couple of days there where we basically just shot every dog we could find. And like I don't think I could do that now. Like then I didn't really care. I'd never had a dog before or anything like that. And it was a business safety related thing. But so we shot a lot of dogs that way. And so we had kind of a funny instance with something kind of related to that. So at some point we had started to re-implement the, like I talked about before, where we'd spend, kind of 2 days out of every like 8 back at the battalion's, firm base, in Camp Fallujah to the east of the city a little bit there. And so one of my friends in the back of the Humvee, he, as we get ready to leave, and this is where, I wouldn't do this now, and now I look back on it, I kind of cringe, but at this time, it was very normal for whoever was going to be the first guy entering a building that we would put our weapons on fire. Like we'd flip it to semi as we'd go to enter. Because we were taking so much contact, and a lot of the buildings that were set up were basically like ambushes, so you'd enter into it, and then they would get to initiate the contact. So again, I wouldn't do it now, and safety-wise, but we very commonly switched our weapons to semi, and I did that all the time in Fallujah. Anytime I was entering a building, I'd switch my weapon on to semi. But so anyway, so we're in the back of this troop carrier Humvee, and we're leaving our company's little firm base down here. So we're leaving the Raider Ranch, and so the way that we would get out was we would basically we'd go down this little road, and then we could kind of come out, and we'd eventually end up east of the city. We'd come back out up here. We go up Henry. We have to go out up by the train station or whatever. But at some point they reopened Fran, and so we were able to like go straight out of there, which was like, for us, we thought that was like the coolest day ever because it chopped like 20 minutes of driving off of there, and it was kind of like a little bit of a, kind of an indicator of success. But so anyways, so we're going to leave the company's little firm base here. And so my friend, kind of like, again, shouldn't have done it, but sort of, at the time kind of normal. So he gets in the back. So as we're going to leave the wire, everyone, loads, like chambers around. So he chambers around. I remember like he kind of checked his stuff. He rested his weapon up on the back of the Humvee, flicked it onto semi. We hit a bump like the instant we walked out there. Pow! Lights a round off. So whoever was like on radio watch or whatever heard it. And so somebody goes, what was that shot? And so everybody kind of froze for like a second because like if you have an ND, like you're going to get NJP, you're going to lose rank like right now. And so everyone froze for a second, and without missing a beat, our platoon guide, who was basically running one of the squads at this point, just because of how low our numbers were, he comes over the radio, he goes, I think one of the posts just shot at a dog. And, company radio comes back, all right, cool, did they get him? We're like, I don't know. Like, okay, so we got out of getting in trouble on that. So that was kind of comical. So as we're kind of getting to this, sort of the last phase of things that we were doing over here is what we started doing is we started occupying, there were 3 houses in this section right here that we called the Screenline. And then there was, I had mentioned before, this house right here is kind of a mansion. And we would set up snipers there pretty often. And the snipers would look across into this section over here because, I'll be honest, we did the best job of clearing our section of anyone. Because, one, obviously it gets a little thinned out towards the bottom, but like, when you look at the after pictures of Fallujah in the 3-1 section, it looks like lunar landscape because we wrecked everything with bulldozers. I kind of mentioned that before. There was a phase where we went through and everything, so company firm bases here, basically everything that was reasonably close to it we destroyed to push back our perimeter, either with bulldozers or with demo and stuff like that. And so it just looked, and then obviously we destroyed a lot of buildings in the course of fighting. So the Screenline was basically when you were on like operations phase of stuff. Is like, one of your squads would be doing like, patrols or whatever, and then at some point you'd go to the Screenline. So we'd have like a team of Marines would stay in one building with like a squad of Iraqis, and there were 3 houses. So your squad would basically be broken up into 3 like little groups into these houses, and then grouped with a group of Iraqis. The Iraqis would stand post up there. We would stand post with them during the day, and it was basically to prevent infiltration across the lines on that, and then also just to keep the Iraqi dudes in line because they were all idiots, totally worthless, super corrupt. Apparently, somebody in one of the other platoons had like seen one of these Iraqi army dudes like across the road, like just having a chat with some like blatant like insurgents or whatever over there. So we would go out to that and set up there, or I went out with the snipers a few times to be like extra security, and we would set up in this house there. And that was kind of fun because like we got to just do whatever the hell we wanted. There was basically no adult supervision at that time if you're with the sniper. So it was like during the day we were allowed to shoot at anything that we wanted to. So any animals, any people that we deemed worthy of engaging, or whatever. And we would also walk around this area and like forage. We'd find like canned goods. We'd find like a bag of potatoes somewhere, and it's like, because we hadn't had real food in like weeks at this point. So everyone's getting really sick because there's just dead bodies laying all over the ground in all the houses. And obviously we hadn't been eating well, hadn't been sleeping well, just done a lot of combat. A lot of us had been wounded at some point. So, you're just down from that. So it's like, and it's starting to get cold. So by now it's getting into December, and, it doesn't get Iowa cold over there in December, but it goes from 120 in the summer down to, in the 30s at night. So that's still a big temperature swing over the course of the year. So the rule was, during the day you could do whatever you want. At night you have to sit down, shut up, and then the snipers would be looking with their thermals. And I was out there with them the one night when they shot a dude across the road. He's probably in one of these buildings down here. Basically, it was a guy who was just blatantly like standing up in a window, had a chest rig on and an AK kind of across his chest. And he was looking out at something. And it took them a while to get permission because they had to go through battalion to radio to 1-3. I don't remember what their call sign was across the road to get permission to be like, hey, we're going to take a shot. So they tagged this guy twice with the SR-25. Then they went over there and, checked the body to make sure that the guy was down over there and came back. And so that was pretty normal stuff. We kind of do Screenline related things over there. Had kind of a funny incident on the Screenline one night. I accidentally lit the house on fire in one of the trucks and stuff out there because we had all these like kerosene heaters, and the Iraqi method of filling those things they had like plastic teapots, and so you'd pour the JP8 or whatever out of the big 5-gallon jugs into these plastic teapots, and then you'd use the plastic teapot and you'd pour it into these kerosene heaters at night. And so I was pouring in there that one night, and the problem with those kerosene heaters is if you bump it, and there's where like kind of the really crappy ones, when you would bump it, the fuel inside of it would shift around, so it would kind of flare up towards the side that the fuel had bumped. So I was pouring extra fuel in there the one night, and I kind of just leaned forward or hit my foot or something like that, and it flared up towards me, and it caught the stream of JP8 or whatever on fire going from the bucket, or not the bucket, sorry, going from the teapot. So it immediately like melted that in my hand, so I had to drop it. So when that hit, it kind of like exploded and like lit the house on fire. And that room was full of like all the jugs of fuel, multiple crates of RPGs and like ammunition and stuff for the Iraqis. And it lit the wooden door on fire to the Iraqi squad leader's like bedroom or whatever in there. And I was like, oh shit. And it's like 2 a.m. So I am freaking out. So I start grabbing these, like the jugs of fuel. Like some of them, like the exteriors are kind of a little bit on fire, so I'm grabbing them and I'm throwing them out in the yard, out there or whatever. And, then I kind of like, I finally run over the door and like I bang on it with my foot. And I was like, hey. And the guy wakes up and he's like, ah, because the door's on fire. So he starts like beating that with a blanket or whatever, And so finally I grab like the last of these buckets that, or not buckets, jeez, I keep saying buckets, like these jugs that are like on fire, throw it out in the yard. And one of the jugs was pretty on fire. So when it hit, it kind of exploded. And it immediately caught fire to one of the Iraqi like police trucks that they had. So that starts burning. And I was like, oh shit. And so then we started like getting bottles of water trying to put that out. And luckily we got it out without causing too much damage. But the way that I know that every person in all the other buildings were sleeping on their posts is that not a single person radioed us or asked what was going on or mentioned that our entire house was on fire for a short amount of time. And by on fire, I mean burning from the first floor to the second floor and a truck in the yard on fire. So that one was on me. That was my bad. I very nearly caused multiple casualties with that. So in the future, when you're using kerosene heaters like that, you take the kerosene heater and you walk it outside. And then you take the fuel and you walk it outside. And then you shut the kerosene heater off. And then you fuel it up and then you walk that back to wherever, and then you relight the heater. You do not do all of those things at the same time, and you do not do it inside. So lesson learned by Lane on that one. So there's kind of, after this, like the Screenline kind of phase and stuff, at some point we started doing like regular-ish kind of patrols, and they started to let people back into the city after they kind of did like little retinal scans and all that sort of stuff. And things became, closer to like normal or whatever, as far as like patrolling wise. And we got relieved somewhat like shortly after that fact. I'm trying to think if there's anything else like relevant that happened, after that time. I do remember that where we were set up. So the company was set up in this building here, obviously. And then we also occupied this house. So then there's like this building across the street, like I forget which one, but so we also had like, that's where we would have people stay. If we had like the weapons platoon guys would come through, or we had like additional people who were like staying. We kind of had like a dual perimeter, and then like the concertina wire and stuff ran along like this whole outside. And like I said, this was like the Reed Sea, so you couldn't really get through there. So I mean, you could on foot, but it was a very good barrier to assist us with that. So then they told us that we were going to be relieved by 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines. So at some point we started having to like, they're like, hey, when 3-4 comes here to do the RIP, the relief in place. So what a RIP means is like some amount of their company will basically come and they'll do what we call like left seat, right seat. So they'll go on a few patrols with, probably like like their squad leader or team leaders might go on a patrol with our squad. And then they get to the point where like, now we kind of integrate most of their squad with us. And then maybe like just our squad leader or whatever would go out with like their squad. And they're like, hey, they're going to stay in this building here. And that building was blown completely to pieces, completely wrecked. And so we spent all this time like, filling sandbags and like completely like barricading and filling in all the gaps and holes and that sort of stuff. And then when they got out, they didn't end up staying there like at all. And we're like, man, you gotta be kidding me. Like I spent hours upon hours outside, when we were like on our rotations, like filling sandbags to try to compensate, for that one. So that kind of sucked, as far as like doing all that extra work for that. Excuse me, but that kind of gets me back. There's one other. I'm trying to think what it was. There's one other kind of part of that I wanted to. One other like sort of story with that I wanted to tell, but I couldn't. Now I can't remember like what it was. Yeah, that's kind of that's pretty much the main idea of Lane's time in Fallujah there, and that covers pretty much all the phases on that sort of stuff. I'm going to give myself 5 more seconds of brain power to think about whatever that last. Oh, I remember what it was. Yeah, so there was at some point in this, I mentioned the mortuary affairs guys, and so the mortuary affairs people would come down. They would drag all the dead bodies out of the buildings, and like put them in bags. But they were also like. They had like, you guys have seen, it looks kind of like a little mask thing or whatever. And they put it on there to do like retinal scans because they're trying to see if there's any like high value targets that, among the dead or whatever. So I remember it was funny. So Mortuary Affairs rolls down. So they had a few vehicles. They had like a flatbed truck because you got to have somewhere to stack all the bodies. So they had a few vehicles. They had like a 50 cal on one and a couple 240s and then like a whole squad worth of Mortuary Affairs Marines. And they rolled into like my company's like perimeter. So they're down here. And my squad just happens to be the squad that's, kind of like doing patrols that day or whatever. And they're like, hey, Mortuary Affairs, is here. They're going to go out and do stuff. All right, cool. And then I remember the Mortuary Affairs guys were like, listen, like we're not going out to do this unless, you guys like augment us with, with Marines for security. And we're kind of like, dude, what? And there's like 12 or 15 of them with multiple vehicles and machine guns. And they're looking at like my raggedy ass squad, which is like with all of the augments from weapons platoon and everything, there's like 7 or 8 of us total. And we're just like, we're at the point, of like exhaustion right now. And they're like, you guys won't go out of the perimeter with 3 vehicles, 3 machine guns, and more than a dozen guys, unless the half dozen or 8 of us who are on like death's doorstep here with sickness will go out with you. And like, yep. And they're like, okay, I guess we'll go out with you. So I remember that was kind of comical, because it was like, we're so exhausted at that point. And I don't say this like in a, like, oh, hey, we're like so tough sort of way or anything like that. But it's like, you kind of get so, like burned out and so numb from stuff. Cause like, you know, guys who watch videos like now of like the Ukraine conflict, and you'll see videos where like artillery stuff's going on, like, you know, hitting the Russian lines, hitting the Ukrainian lines or whatever. But like guys won't even be like running around or like, you know, or moving urgently from that. They're kind of just like, whatever. And it's like, I've never been under artillery fire. Obviously, I've been under mortar fire and rocket fire. But it's like, I know exactly how that happens. Because at some point, you're basically just like, I don't care. You know, I'm exhausted. I'm tired. You know, this isn't the first time someone's been lobbing stuff at us. Is like, I don't care to panic anymore. Whatever. I'm just here because I'm here. So that part, I totally understand. But I think that's going to end my in my personal discussions on my experiences during Operation Phantom Fury. If you guys got any questions or anything, like, feel free to comment, or you can always email them to my channel and stuff like that. But remember, guys, only the hits count, and you can never miss fast enough to catch back up.